The thing about moving into a new house, especially an old Victorian with a price that seemed too good to be true, is that you focus on the potential, the charm of the crown molding and the promise of a garden. Not the way the floorboards groan in the dead of night with a weight that doesn't belong to you, or how the air in the kitchen always carries a faint, metallic chill no matter how high you crank the heat. For the first week, it was all cardboard boxes and the smell of fresh paint. My wife Sarah humming as she unpacked our life. Our golden retriever, Buster, chasing sunbeams across the hardwood floors. The basement door was just a door, a sliver of painted whitewood tucked under the staircase, and I didn't think twice about it until the third night, when a sound jolted me awake at 3:07 a.m. A sound like someone slowly, deliberately, dragging a heavy sack of gravel across the concrete floor below. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum in the silence, and I lay there frozen, ears straining, trying to convince myself it was the pipes, the house settling, anything but what it sounded like. Buster, who usually slept at the foot of our bed, was gone, and I found him downstairs, not at the basement door, but pressed against the front door, whining low in his throat, his entire body trembling. That was the first sign, the first tiny crack in the foundation of my reality. The noises became a nightly ritual, a symphony of dread conducted by some unseen maestro. Faint, wet scratching, a low, guttural whisper that seemed to coil up from the vents, and once, the unmistakable sound of a child's laughter, but it was wrong, sour, like a recording played backward at half speed. Sarah heard none of it, sleeping through the cacophony with a peace that infuriated me, and I started to question my own sanity, the sleepless nights carving hollows under my eyes, my hands developing a constant, fine tremor. I began avoiding the basement door, feeling a palpable wave of nausea whenever I passed it, a sensation of being watched by something that saw me not as a person, but as a piece of meat, a temporary occupant in its domain. The change in Buster was the most heartbreaking confirmation. His joyful spirit evaporated, replaced by a cowering anxiety. He'd stare for hours at the basement door, a low growl rumbling in his chest, his lips pulled back from his teeth in a silent snarl, and he refused to go near it, his food bowl left untouched if I placed it within 10 feet of that threshold. I tried to rationalize it. I called pest control, who found nothing, a plumber who shrugged and said old houses make old noises, but none of them felt the sheer malevolence that seeped from the gap under that door, a cold so deep it felt like it was sucking the warmth from my very soul. My breaking point came on a Tuesday. I dropped a glass jar of pasta sauce and it shattered, sending red globs and shards skittering across the kitchen floor, one large piece sliding to a stop right against the basement door, and with a sigh of pure frustration, I fetched the dustpan and brush, my skin crawling as I knelt there, the unnatural cold leaching through my jeans. As I reached for the final shard, I saw it. A single, greasy, black fingerprint smudged on the white paint of the door, at about the height a small child would touch it. But it was all wrong. The print was too long, the fingers too slender, and it seemed to be made of a substance that absorbed the light, a void in the shape of a touch. My blood ran cold. I scrambled backward, my breath catching in my throat. And that's when I heard the first whisper from the other side of the door. Not in my ears, but inside my mind. A voice like grinding stones and breaking glass that said, "I see you." From that moment, the entity, for I could no longer deny it was an entity, grew bolder, more insatiable. The whispers became a constant, insidious murmur in the back of my skull, promising things, horrible things, showing me flashes of images. Sarah lying still in our bed, her skin pale and cold, Buster stiff and lifeless in his dog bed. And it whispered that it could make them go away. It could give me peace if I would just open the door. It preyed on my exhaustion, my fear, my deepest, most selfish desire for it all to just stop. I stopped sleeping altogether, camped out on the living room couch with a baseball bat, staring at that door until my vision blurred, the house smelling increasingly of damp earth and something else, something coppery and sweet, like rotting meat left in the sun. Sarah pleaded with me, her eyes full of tears and confusion. She thought I was having a breakdown, and maybe I was, but it was a breakdown being orchestrated by the thing in the basement. One night, the whispers changed their tune. They stopped threatening and started sympathizing, the voice softening into a horrific mimicry of my late father's. "It's okay, son," it crooned. "You're so tired. Just let me in. Just a crack. I can help you sleep. I can make it all quiet." The temptation was a physical ache, a siren song promising an end to the relentless terror, and I found myself standing in front of the door, my hand hovering over the cold brass knob, my entire body screaming in protest as my fingers brushed the metal. I don't know what stopped me. Maybe a last vestige of self-preservation. Maybe Buster's sudden, agonized howl from the other room. But I snatched my hand back as if burned and did the only thing I had left. I called a priest. Father Malachi was an old man with kind eyes and a weariness that seemed to stretch back centuries. And the moment he stepped into the house, his face tightened, the color draining from his cheeks. He didn't need me to tell him where it was. He walked straight to the basement door, holding a rosary out before him like a shield, the beads trembling in his grip. "It is not a ghost," he said, his voice grave. "This is a presence, an ancient one. It does not haunt this house. It infests it. It feeds on fear and thrives on invitation. You must not listen to it. You must not open this door." He performed a blessing, chanting in Latin, sprinkling holy water that sizzled and steamed where it touched the wood of the door, and for a few hours, there was a profound, blessed silence. A weight lifted from my chest, and I wept with relief. But the silence was a trick, a predator playing dead. That night, the worst night, the whispers returned, not as a murmur, but as a deafening roar in my mind, a torrent of hatred and vile promises. The door began to rattle in its frame, not a shaking, but a deep, resonant pounding as if a battering ram were being thrown against it from the other side. The temperature plummeted, our breath pluming in the air, and the foul smell of rot became so thick it was a struggle to breathe. Sarah was screaming, clutching my arm. Buster was barking, a frantic, terrified sound, and then everything stopped. The pounding ceased. The silence was absolute, more terrifying than the noise. And then a new sound, a soft, pathetic scratching, and a tiny, broken voice, a perfect imitation of a lost little girl. "Please," it whimpered. "I'm so scared. It's dark in here. Please, mister, let me out. I just want to go home." It was a masterstroke of psychological torture, using the one thing my frayed empathy couldn't ignore, the sound of a helpless child. The voice was so real, so perfectly pathetic, that for a moment, my logic was completely overridden by a surge of paternal instinct. "We have to help her," Sarah cried, starting toward the door, but I grabbed her, the memory of Father Malachi's warning a flickering candle in the storm of my fear. "That's not a child," I hissed, my voice cracking. The thing on the other side heard me. The whimpering stopped, replaced by a long, slow, wet exhalation of pure rage. Then the door handle began to turn. Slowly, deliberately, it was unlocked. I watched, paralyzed, as the brass knob rotated, millimeter by millimeter, the mechanism inside clicking softly. This was it. It was coming out. There was no lock that could hold it, no prayer that could bind it anymore. It had fed on my terror for weeks, and now it was strong enough to open the door itself. In that split second, a memory flashed in my mind, not of the priest, but of the real estate agent, a slick man named Davis, who had joked nervously about the previous owner, a reclusive old man who had passed away peacefully in his sleep. I suddenly knew, with a chilling certainty, that he hadn't. He had made a deal. He had opened the door. And in a final, desperate act of self-preservation, a thought born not of courage but of sheer, animalistic survival, I did the only thing I could think to do. I spoke to it, my voice a dry rasp, barely audible. "Take the dog," I whispered. The turning of the knob stopped. The oppressive silence returned, thick and heavy. From the living room, Buster's frantic barking turned into a confused whine, then a sharp, startled yelp that was cut off with a sickening, wet crunch. And then silence. A deep, profound, and peaceful silence. The police found no sign of Buster, no forced entry, nothing. Sarah, traumatized and grieving, moved out a week later. She couldn't look at me. She said there was something dead in my eyes. She was right. The house is quiet now. The whispers are gone. The basement door is just a door again. I still feel the cold sometimes, and I still catch the faint scent of rot, but it's a small price to pay for the silence. I go about my days in a numb haze, the guilt a cold stone in my gut, but it's a manageable guilt. It's the price of my sanity. Sometimes, in the dead of night, I'll walk past the basement door and I'll hear it. Not a whisper, not a threat, but a single soft, satisfied sound. A sound like gravel being gently shifted. And I know it's waiting, it's patient. It knows I'm capable of it now. It knows that when it gets hungry again, when the silence starts to feel too loud, I'll be here, and I'll know exactly what to offer.